Today, we are cracking open Yuval Noah Harari's incredible book, 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. And let me tell you, this is a deep dive. It grapples with the absolute biggest questions of right now, from why our politics feels so broken to how technology is changing what it means to be human. So let's get into it. Harari starts with this puzzle. He says that for most of the 20th century, we had these big, competing stories about how the world should work. Fascism, communism, and liberalism. But one by one, they fell. Fascism lost World War II, communism crumbled with the Berlin Wall, and now, Harari argues, the liberal story, the one about democracy and free markets that seemed to have won, is starting to come apart at the seams. We're left without a good story, without a map for the future. And that leads us to the single biggest question in the entire book. If all the old maps are useless, and the world is changing faster than ever, what happens next? Where are we actually going? Harari's book is really his attempt to figure that out. Okay, so our first stop on this journey, let's dig into exactly why that dominant story, the liberals' story, is in such deep trouble. You know, for a long time, liberalism felt inevitable, like it was just the default setting for the modern world. But then you have events like the 2016 US election or Brexit, and suddenly it's clear that millions of people are deeply disillusioned. For them, the promise of a better life just hasn't panned out. The system feels rigged, designed to help a tiny few at the top and leave everyone else behind. And think about what a huge shift this is. Back in the 20th century, all the propaganda, whether it was communist or capitalist, put the common person at the center. You know, the brave factory worker, the heroic farmer. The message was always, you matter, you are the future. But today, Harari says that feeling is gone. Now, ordinary people look at the future and they don't see themselves in it. They just feel irrelevant. So, what is causing this massive crisis of confidence? Harari points to the collision of two technological tsunamis, infotech and biotech. And when these two things come together, they create something totally new in history, the ability to hack human beings. And this right here, this isn't some far-off sci-fi idea. This is the central challenge of our lives right now. The whole idea of liberalism, of democracy, is built on the belief in individual free will. But what happens when technology can predict and even shape our choices better than we can? What happens to free will then? So here's Harari's core concept. He says we're all becoming hackable animals. It means that with enough data and enough computing power, algorithms can understand the biological processes happening in your brain. They can figure out what makes you happy, what makes you angry, and what you're going to choose next, often before you even know it yourself. This hack basically happens in 3 steps. First, science shows us that our decisions aren't from some mysterious spirit. They're the result of billions of neurons in our brains firing, basically just calculating probabilities. Second, that thing we call intuition or a gut feeling, it's really just our brain's amazing ability to recognize patterns. And third, and this is the kicker, AI is now learning to recognize those patterns in us better than we can ourselves. This new power to hack human beings creates what Harari thinks is the most profound and the most dangerous political shift of the entire 21st century. And this is a really fundamental change. The big fights of the last century were all about fighting exploitation. Think unions fighting for better wages, or civil rights movements fighting for equality. The battle was about being treated fairly by the system. But in this century, Harari warns, the big fear is becoming totally irrelevant to the system in the first place. The struggle isn't about being used anymore, it's about not being needed at all. This is such a stark warning from Harari. Because when the system needed workers for its factories and soldiers for its armies, the masses had power. They could organize, they could go on strike. But how do you protest when the system simply doesn't need you anymore? What leverage do you have then? And this threat gets supercharged by the insane levels of inequality we already have. When you realize that the richest 1% already own half of everything, the fear of a useless class becomes terrifyingly real. As AI and biotech give the super rich even more power, maybe even the power to biologically upgrade themselves, that gap could become a chasm. Okay, so if the liberal story is broken and technology is throwing us these massive curveballs, can we just go back to the old ways? Can we find answers in our older traditions? Well, Harari is pretty skeptical. Look, it makes total sense that when the world gets confusing and scary, people retreat to what's familiar. Nationalism and religion offer a powerful sense of community and meaning. But Harari asks a really tough question. Are these frameworks, which were built for a different world, actually capable of solving the global problems we face today? He argues, pretty convincingly, that they're not. Because these three huge threats, nuclear war, ecological collapse, and technological disruption, are global by their very nature. No single country, no matter how patriotic, can build a wall to stop climate change or an AI arms race. These problems demand global cooperation, but nationalism is all about us versus them. And what about religion? Well, instead of providing universal answers to unite humanity, Harari points out that religion often gets co-opted by nationalism. It becomes just another way to draw a line in the sand, to define who's in our tribe and who isn't, which makes that global cooperation we need even harder to find. So, if our modern stories are broken and our ancient stories aren't up to the task, where on earth do we go from here? It all comes down to what Harari believes is the most important political question of our era. All of these different threads that we've been pulling on, the crumbling liberal story, the rise of AI, the threat of irrelevance, the limits of nationalism, they all lead to one single critical point. That's it. According to Harari, this is the whole ballgame. Because data is the new oil. It's the resource that fuels the algorithms that are starting to run our world. Whoever controls the data can understand human beings, and whoever understands human beings can control them. The stakes here are just massive. As Harari says, this isn't just about who gets to sell you stuff online. This is about who gets to have godlike power, the power to literally re-engineer life itself. So figuring out how to regulate the ownership of data is the central political fight of the 21st century. And that leaves us with one last really humbling thought from Harari. In a world where outside forces, where algorithms can understand our own minds better than we can, maybe the most important journey isn't to try and understand the world out there, but to understand the world in here. Maybe, just maybe, if we want to have any hope of shaping the 21st century, the first step is the hardest one of all, to finally get to know ourselves.